Hey everybody, and welcome to another lecture with Coding with Roby. And in this lecture, we're going to be going over the Git technology. So let's dive in. Let's start with the first question. What is Git? Git is a free and open source distributed version control system. Git can handle small to large size applications and projects. And Git allows team members to use the same files by distributed branches and environments. Now, if we needed to remember one thing, it is that Git is a version control system for our code. Think of how online documents work in modern day. Typically, when you open a document, there is some type of version control attached, so you can see when something was added to a document and who added the new additional work. This is exactly how Git version control works, but instead of a document, it version controls your code. Let's check out a Git example to really solidify what we're trying to learn with Git. Let's say we have a Python class called math functions, and inside math functions, we have a single function called addition. We can see addition takes in two parameters, A and B, and returns the A and B variables added together. This is a very small and simple class and function that we are using with our Git. However, this version is version 1 of the code. So the first time you have wrote this piece of code within our application is going to be version 1. And remember, this is just a simple Python class and a simple addition function. And now let's enhance this function to now incorporate a subtraction function. Here we have our original class of math functions with our addition functionality. Now the requirement was to create a new function that allows subtraction to our application. So let's add this functionality. We now have our new subtraction function that takes in A and B as the parameters and returns the two parameters subtracted from one another. So now we have our subtraction function and our addition and simple Python class. However, since we added subtraction to this class, we are now on version 2 of this application. And that is because we added a new function, which is a newer version of the code from the original simple application. Okay, now we just got off the phone with our client, and the client wants another function added to this class. They are dying to have multiplication added to the application. So let's add this functionality. Now again, this multiplication function is brand new code. And since we're adding this code to the original application, this makes this entire application now version 3. Now I know this was a goofy example, but what we were able to do was to create a version control system between our application. We started with our version 1 of our code that had just our class and the addition functionality created. We then committed our first change, which included our subtraction functionality, followed by our last commit, which created version 3 of our application along with our multiplication functionality. Now, what is special about having Git in version control is the fact that we can go to any version of our code. We can go back from version 3 to version 2, or we can even go back all the way to version 1. This is all handled within version control and Git. Now, a real example on how version control can benefit you is the fact if you run into a bug on a new feature. Let's pretend you are enhancing our application with a huge new feature that users have been dying to use. Right before you release the feature, bam, you run into a bug that is breaking your entire application. But not just your local environment is broken. You had your entire team add this bug to their local environments as well. If it wasn't for version control, you and your entire team would be stuck, unable to work until this bug was figured out. But thankfully, due to version control and Git, we're able to work on the bug fix while the team reverted this local environment back to a commit before the bug was introduced so they can continue working. Now, another huge pro to Git is that it's distributed, which means everything is spread out. Without Git, we have our class functions, which now include addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Bill has the code and is working on a new enhancement to add square root functionality to the application. His teammate, Sarah, is also working on her own new feature to add the power functionality to the application. Currently, without Git, the only way Bill and Sarah can exchange code with one another is for them to send files to each other and continually copy and paste each other's new code and functionalities with hope that nothing will break. As one can see, this is a very dangerous operation, even with version control. But how does one manage multiple files being updated by multiple different people? This is where Git repositories, branches, merges, etc. all within Git take their place. With Git and Git repositories, Bill and Sarah do not need to communicate their new changes and allow Git to handle this process for them. Using Git and Git repos allow the developers to have a peace of mind when developing new features or bug fixes. Git will handle all version control as well, so when developers want to pull or fetch new versions of their code, they can do it without worrying about breaking the application. After we go over the Git basics, how will we be able to use Git within our project? Well, let's take a look at our current to-dos application. We have our todos.py file with a auth.py file, home.html, and some styles.css. Our first commit will to add all of the files to a Git repository. We could add a new commit that will enhance our todos.py file, and we could also do another commit to add an entire new file to our application. This will all get saved into our Git with version control and allows us to deploy our application. We most likely won't be doing commit 2 and 3 since our application is complete, but it is definitely something that you can add to your project to add new features to the to-dos application we just built. With Git, the sky is the limit, because we no longer have to worry about our application breaking due to new features because we can always roll back to an earlier version where the application worked. Remember, Git is a free and open source distributed version control system that allows us to have complete control over our application. Git allows us to have complete version control over our applications, as well as have teammates work on the same files with no fear of overwriting files. Git is becoming a required technology for software developers and engineers. So there is not a better time to learn this technology than now. To recap, Git allows us to track changes for our code, allows us to have a strong version control system, and allows team members to use the same files without needing to sync up every time someone creates a new feature or update. Wow, now I know this is just a bunch of information. Great job. This wraps up the lecture on the Git Introduction, and I will see you in the next video.